All right, so a recent Wall Street Journal op-ed posed a very controversial question. The question is Gen Z unemployable? Quite a question. The op-ed does not make a conclusion one way or the other, which is nice of them. But it does point out that young people and hiring managers have very different priorities, and I guess that makes sense. So the author is named Susie Welch, and she is a business school professor who asked both hiring managers and Gen Z what values they hold. And as you're about to find out, their answers were very, very different from each other's. So the hiring managers, here's what they had to say as far as their values. So achievement came in first, and it's the value of wanting accomplishments and success other people can see. That value comes in 11th place for Gen Z. 61% wish they had less of it in their lives. And next for the hiring managers was scope, which reflects the desire for learning, action, and stimulation. And that ranks 10th for Gen Z. That's surprising. Third for hiring managers was work centricism, the desire to work for the sake of work. That was 9th for Gen Z. I don't know anyone who just wants to work to work. And then also when they calculated how many Gen Z respondents identified achievement, scope, and work centricism in their top 5 values, only 154 of them did, or 2.04% did so. So if Gen Z doesn't value achievement or scope or work centricism, what do they value? That is a question. So in first place, this one made me laugh. It's a Greek term and it is eudaimonia. And it encompasses the desire for self-care and personal pleasure. So they just like to feel nice, which, who doesn't? Next comes voice, the value that reflects the priority a person places on expressing authentic individuality. And then third, this one is a Latin term this time. It's non sibi, and it means not for oneself, the desire to help people, which is very nice. And fourth is affluence, which is exactly as it sounds. And fifth is beholderism, the desire for things, including yourself, to be beautiful. And you know what? Yeah, things need to be beautiful. And I will talk about this all day because it's not okay that they've convinced us that, these plain dumb houses and these plain concrete. See, I'm Taylor's laughing at me because I'm already about to go off on this.
Go.
No, we need like the brutalism and all they just convince us that oh, these builder grade houses, you like it. You like minimalism, you like gray houses, and you like beige. And we're no, I don't. I want color. I want pattern. I want ornateness around me. And I understand that it costs more money. I understand that it's hard to do, right? But beautiful things are supposed to last forever. And they do, they make you feel better. They make you happier, bring some color into your life. I know that's not the point of the story though. So going back to Gen Z and the things that they like versus their employers, I feel for Gen Z, right? I'm a millennial, I'm pushing 40, and the time that I grew up was very different from when they were growing up. And I feel for them, as millennials, we were taught that we could be whatever we want to be. And then we got out into the world and we were hit with a housing crisis. And then all of the markets crashed. It was a really, really bad time to be entering the world. Everybody knows that. But things for Gen Z could arguably be worse for them now. Hiring is at an all-time low. You're having to deal with ghost job listings. It's just ridiculous trying to find a job in this country. And then even if you find a job these days, you could easily just lose the job sometimes before you even start the job. That has happened to people that I know personally, and it's happening to people all across the country. So it is understandable that there is a disparity between the things that employers want and the things that employees want. That has always been the case. But I think that Gen Z, I admire the fact that they want to help people. They want to feel valued in the workplace. Who doesn't, but at the same time, you do have to make sacrifices somewhere. You're not going to get the perfect job. I like my job though. That being said, I don't know, Sharon, what do you think about this?
Look, I think you're exactly right. And you're tapping into something. We have been told by they're not even 1%ers now. It's a fraction of a percent who's at the top, billionaire bullies who are telling us what we deserve and what we don't, and the scraps that we get. And so you're going to be labeled a spoiled, entitled, jerk, a brat for saying, look, if I have to spend a lot of time here and these are the services that you'd like, here's the trade-off. A nice environment and to be treated with respect. And I don't know, some maternity leave, paternity leave, healthcare, whatever it is. You don't deserve it. That's what we've been conditioned to accept in this society. And I just don't agree with it. Keep pushing, keep demanding. They do on their yachts.
Yeah, and Gen Z, they kind of came up at the very bottom of a brand new world.
Mhm.
I'm 33, and in my lifetime, like my first cell phone I didn't have till I was 14, and it was a flip phone, and there was no real app market, and those types of technologies have greatly revolutionized the job market. Automation is continuing to expand, as well as the way that Gen Z has just grown up through a computer screen and handhelds, and that has directly interfered with a lot of their social development. And you can look at the stats in terms of like their fulfillment in their relationships. Gen Z is like not really having sex at all compared to other generations. These types of things, again, being the pandemic, which kept people inside during very key moments in their developmental years. And so they just got hit with so much. They got hit with the housing crisis and the shutdown, and they about to get hit with this the recession that's looming right now. As the dollar, the US dollar being the reserve currency is, those days coming to an end. And they just bore the brunt of a lot of change. And so, like, for instance, Generation A going forward, we have a lot of information on like, okay, kids let's have some time stamps on how long they can use the pads. Like, we have all this information that we can correct going forward. As these kids are, like 5 years old right now, they'll be able to address the job market and be more prepared for it, hopefully. But Gen Z really just was born at a hell of a time, and life isn't fair.
Yeah, and I do feel for them, like sometimes I do think it's a little bit ridiculous. Like, oh, you want to feel good at work? Who doesn't, But at the same time, like, like I feel like if I was them, and we do see this reflected in polling and things like that. They're a very lonely generation. Jackson, you were alluding to that. They are looking for fulfillment in places. And I don't think that they're getting it in the ways that we did, my generation did, just because those slight differences in the ways that we grew up make a big, big difference. Like the way that we created friendships and had relationships and things like that. All of it is very different today than it was back then. And today the world is much more disconnected than connected, even though like the big promise of social media and these devices that we're all addicted to now was that it would connect the world, and it has, but maybe not in the ways that we were hoping it would, maybe not in the ways that were actually beneficial for us. And then you have these jobs that people are doing, and it's like there's no fulfillment because you're not creating anything, right? You're not like seeing your contribution anywhere because you're just doing like part of a job, right? You're doing like this little bit and then it goes somewhere else and somebody else does another little bit. So you're not getting any kind of value or fulfillment. And before I was doing this job, I had a job like that, and it was like the most depressed I was ever in my life. And I'm not a depressed person, but I found my way out. But not everybody can do that, so that's understandable.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.